The Body Bathing, a horror film whose name alone is enough to send shivers down your spine. And believe me, friends, this is the most unsettling film of this year. This story is not based on fiction, but on a true folk legend that took place in a remote village in Indonesia. One after another, terrifying deaths, goosebump-inducing visuals, and a suspense so deep that if you don't watch this movie until the very end, you will never be able to guess its true and horrifying climax. So, hold your breath, and if you have a faint-hearted friend with you, call them over right now, because today's journey is going to be absolutely terrifying. There's a tradition in that remote area of Indonesia, the Body Washing Palace, which is a sacred place for cleansing the dead. It is said that this profession is passed down through generations only to women from mother to daughter. Here, the corpses are washed with special water in a traditional manner, then wrapped in a 2-layered white shroud, and finally, only the face is left exposed. They believe that only through this ritual can the soul of the deceased find peace and enter the cycle of reincarnation. Now, because these people live among the dead 12 months a year, 24 hours a day, they develop a distinct kind of energy. They're the ones who can see the souls of the dead while still being alive. Some experienced body washers can even sense the signs of an impending misfortune beforehand. And in this entire village, Mate E was the only woman who performed this work. One evening, Mate E, dressed in a white robe, was preparing to pray in her room. Just then, suddenly, a strange sound is heard from outside the house. She cautiously walks to the window, glances outside, but there was nothing there. Confused, she turns back, and right then, that creepy sound echoes again. It feels as if some shadow is lurking right outside the house. And the very next second, a terrifying ghost comes and stands right behind her. That ghost was mimicking Mei Yi's every single move precisely. But Mei Yi was accustomed to these things. She did not panic. She kept herself calm and continued her prayer. But just then, a cold hand comes to rest on her shoulder. As Mei Yi turns around with a start, her playful daughter, Xiaomei, was standing in front of her. Xiaomei had been watching her mother do this since childhood. Being her mother's successor, she was supposed to take over this job, but Xiaomei did not want to do this body washing work at all. Despite living in an environment of corpses for years, whenever a horrifying or strange case came up, Xiaomei's heart would sink and she couldn't overcome her psychological fear. Mei did not argue with her daughter. She opened a box of cake given by her best friend Ida, hoping to lift her daughter's mood and comfort her. But as soon as she removed the lid of the box, her senses flew away. The beautiful cake kept inside had rotted completely and was crawling with countless maggots. Seeing this, the color drained from Mei Yi's face. From her years of experience in body washing, she understood that a huge and terrible accident had befallen Ida. Without wasting any time, she immediately put on her black robe, picked up her necessary gear, and despite Xiaomei asking repeatedly, hurried out of the house without looking back. As soon as she opened the front door, an announcement echoed over the village loudspeaker. Ida had passed away. Mei strictly instructed Xiaomei to stay inside the house and lock the door, and she ran alone toward Aida's house. But the sight she witnessed upon reaching Aida's house shook even Mei. Aida's corpse was lying in a massive pool of blood. There was blood everywhere, and she had died in a very bizarre and unnatural posture. Right next to the corpse on the floor lay a picture of a disabled or helpless person. With a very heavy and grieving heart, Mei Yi gave Ida her final send-off and washed her body. After completing all the rituals, as Mei Yi was returning to her house, she suddenly fainted right at her own doorstep. When her two children, her daughter Xiaomei and her brother, saw this, they ran over, picked up their mother, and took her inside the room. But after this, things began to turn very strange. Ever since Mei Yi regained consciousness, she had completely changed. Without speaking a word, without moving an inch, she just lay on the bed, her wide-open eyes constantly staring at the ceiling. Xiaomei tried asking her so many times, but not a single word came out of her mother's mouth. Xiaomei thought that perhaps her mother was exhausted from Aida's death, so she didn't disturb her further. The next morning, while Xiaomei was outside washing clothes, her mother suddenly walked out of the room. At this moment, She looked so weak that she didn't even have the strength to lift dry firewood to light the stove. She asked Xiaomei to light the stove, and then took out Aida's blood-stained clothes that she had brought with her and threw them into the fire. Xiaomei was just about to question her regarding this, when her mother silently turned around and started heading back to her room. But as she passed through the corridor, a terrifying movement occurred in the mirror fixed there. Sensing something strange, Mei looked toward the mirror, and what she saw made the ground slip from beneath her feet. Her own reflection inside the mirror had turned into a hideous ghost. Being a body washer, she knew exactly what this meant. Her time was now up. Death, or rather that horrifying demise, was very close to her. And exactly as she had thought, that is what happened. Late at night, while the entire village was asleep, two scary and dark hands slowly began to extend downward from the ceiling of the room. Mei saw them. She was completely terrified, but there was no way to escape that invisible and monstrous power. When Xiaomei woke up at exactly 11 o'clock at night, she felt a terrifying struggle between her mother and that unseen shadow. It seemed that right before dying, her mother was fighting a massive terror. By the time Xiaomei reached her room, Mei had already breathed her last. Her entire body was covered in blood, and her eyes remained wide open in shock. Xiaomei was weeping inconsolably. Hearing her screams, her brother also rushed into the room immediately. The next day, the two siblings began the ritual for their mother's final send-off. With her mother's death, that heavy responsibility of washing the dead had now fallen onto Xiaomei's shoulders. But the most painful part for her was that the first corpse of her life she had to wash was none other than her own biological mother. She held back her tears, hardened her heart, and began cleaning her mother's body. But as soon as she opened her mother's mouth to clean it, she fell backward out of sheer terror. Inside her mother's mouth, jammed in her throat, was a sharp piece of iron wire. This horrifying sight shook Xiaomei to her core. Now she understood that her mother's death was no ordinary death, but a deep and dark secret lay hidden behind it. After the funeral, Xiaomei was sitting exhausted in her room when suddenly there was a knock on the door. Outside was the village chief's wife, who had come to give Xiaomei the money for her work. But just then, the eyes of a few other women standing outside the door suddenly fell upon Xiaomei's bed, where a massive bloodstain was visible. Those women started coming inside and questioning the cause of Mei Yi's death. But in a panic, Xiaomei immediately shut the door. Now, as it happens in every small village, rumors spread like wildfire. There was a woman named Telly in the village, notorious for her loose tongue. She spread the word across the whole village that Mei Yi's death was no ordinary one. She also claimed that the recent deaths happening in the village were all the result of a black magic curse. Telly was muttering away in her own world, but she did not know that the consequence of this action was coming for her very soon. In the evening, when the villagers gathered to pray for the peace of Mei Yi's soul, a deeply horrifying incident took place. In the middle of the prayer, a hazy and terrifying shadow suddenly emerged from Telly's body, and it picked up the holy crystal kept on the ground. Before Telly could comprehend anything, the lights of the entire village suddenly went out. Jet black darkness enveloped everything. Telly got terrified and started screaming frantically, "I did it! I did it!" But in the eyes of the other people, everything was completely normal. They couldn't see any ghost. The village chief asked everyone to stay calm, lit the candles, and restarted the prayer. But in this atmosphere, Xiaomei's eyes saw something that no one else could see. She saw the spirits of her dead mother and Ida standing amidst the crowd. And both those spirits, without blinking, were staring continuously at a woman named Anna. Their glare was a clear indication that the next death was going to be Anna's. Xiaomei trembled violently. She rubbed her eyes repeatedly, wanting to assure herself if this was real. Was she also, like her mother, beginning to have premonitions of people's deaths? And right then, the very next second, a vision flashes before her eyes, in which she sees Anna's horrific death in advance. Xiaomei panics completely. As soon as the prayer ended, Xiaomei ran frantically toward her house, and exactly what she had foreseen came to pass. Anna also died in an extremely mysterious and painful manner. Her corpse was also drenched in blood, just like her mother's and Aida's. An atmosphere of dread was all around. Xiaomei immediately arrived to wash Anna's body, but when she had washed half of the corpse, suddenly, that dead body snapped up and sat right up. The corpse began beating its own stomach frantically with its hands. This horrifying sight made Xiaomei's soul shudder. She gathered courage and slowly moved forward to remove the wet cloth wrapped around the corpse. And what was there made Xiaomei lose her senses? A sharp iron wire was embedded inside Anna's stomach. Xiaomei pulled the wire out with trembling hands. During this, that corpse kept staring at Xiaomei continuously, and after Xiaomei comforted it, Anna's body finally went still. Following this incident, Xiaomei spoke to Anna's son, Mad, because she had found an identical iron wire from both her mother's and Anna's bodies. She was desperate to know this horrifying truth. Mad told her that right before dying, his mother was constantly calling out the name of a woman named Nisha. Xiaomei fell into deep thought. Then Mad took out an old, yellowed photograph from his pocket and shared that Nisha and his mother used to be very close friends once. But the villagers say that Nisha's character was not good. She had ruined someone else's home, after which the entire village gathered and brutally banished her from here. After hearing this story, a thought fixed itself in Xiaomei's mind. To find out the truth, she took an extremely dangerous step that very night. She went alone to the graveyard under the cover of night and began digging up Anna's freshly dug grave. Her breath was short with fear, but she opened the coffin lid and searched the corpse. And just as she suspected, the same iron wire was present in Anna's body too. Now Xiaomei completely understood that these serial deaths happening in the village were no coincidence, but a deeply terrifying and bloody curse. The next morning, an uproar broke out across the village. The village chief announced over the radio that someone had dug up Anna's grave in the dead of night, and it was none other than someone from the village itself. When Xiaomei's brother returned home after finishing his night shift, he noticed wet mud tracks at the doorstep. Following those footprints, he went straight to Xiaomei's room and spotted the bucket filled with mud under the bed. Without a second thought, he understood that his sister had done all this. He asked Xiaomei angrily why she wanted to dig up the grave. Xiaomei locked the room in panic and said while weeping, "Brother, the deaths happening in the village are not accidents. A bloody curse has gripped our village." But neither of them knew that someone was hiding outside the window, and it was none other than that same big-mouthed woman, Telly. Telly had overheard the entire conversation between the siblings, and as soon as morning came, she spread a rumor throughout the village that Xiaomei was involved in black magic and the mud curse. In the evening, Xiaomei angrily reached Telly's house and asked her why she spread this lie. A heated argument broke out between the two, their faces turning red with anger. But just then a police officer present there intervened and calmed them down. That police officer, in the course of conversation, said something that triggered a spark in Xiaomei's mind. The cop said, "The woman you're talking about passed away years ago. She committed suicide. She didn't have a son, only a daughter, who would probably be your age today. But she is all alone now." As soon as Xiaomei heard this, lightning flashed in her mind. She instantly remembered Lika, the orphan girl of the village. Is Lika actually Nisha's daughter? To find the answer to this question, Xiaomei quietly snuck into Lika's deserted house. She searched the whole house, but initially she found nothing. But just as she was about to leave in disappointment, her gaze fell upon a loose brick on the floor. As soon as she removed that brick, the sight inside gave her goosebumps. Some old photographs were kept inside, and the most shocking part, the same terrifying iron wire was wrapped behind each and every photograph. And the photograph at the very bottom had written on it, Lika's mother. This was a picture of Lika and Nisha from their childhood. Xiaomei's suspicion was absolutely correct. Lika was indeed Nisha's daughter, and she was the mastermind behind this entire bloody game. The whole truth was now as clear as water. Just then, another death was announced over the village radio. Because Xiaomei was now the only body washer left, she had to go there. But as soon as she pulled that iron wire out of the corpse's body, hearing Xiaomei's terrifying scream, the police officers immediately broke down the door, rushed inside, and saved her. Xiaomei pointed a trembling finger at Lika, standing in the crowd. When Lika saw that her secret was out, she turned around and ran swiftly toward her house. Xiaomei also tried to run and catch her, but by then it was too late. As soon as Lika reached her house and began packing her belongings, a crowd of superstitious and ignorant village women surrounded her house from all sides. They all held sticks and clubs in their hands. They were shouting that Lika was a witch and they would kill her. They broke the door down and dragged Lika out into the middle of the road. Lika was screaming helplessly because exactly 15 years ago, her innocent mother Nisha was dragged out of the house by these very women in the exact same way. They had beaten her mother brutally with sticks, clawed her face with iron wires, and poured dirty water on her. Little Lika had watched her mother die an agonizing death right before her eyes. And today, that same Lika had grown up. To avenge her mother's death, she had sent this horrifying iron wire curse upon all those women who had raised a hand against her mother. The ones dying were none other than those sinful people. Lika screamed, "This was my right. They killed my mother." But blood was riding high on those ignorant and illiterate women. They didn't listen to Lika and slammed her to the ground. The monstrosity hidden within those women had awakened. They began beating Lika and Xiaomei, who had come to intervene, like savages. Just then, Xiaomei's brother came charging through the mad crowd, and he threw his body over his sister and Lika to protect them. But that crowd had become so blind that instead of stopping, They started raining blows with their sticks on Xiaomei's brother as well. And then a heavy blow struck his head, and he collapsed right there. As soon as Xiaomei's brother died, the high of those cowardly and ignorant women faded. They got scared. Some women who had only come to watch the spectacle began to slip away quietly. The crowd that was bloodthirsty just a moment ago was now running away with their tails between their legs. Lying in the middle of the road now were only Xiaomei, Lika, and the cold corpse of their brother. This horrifying tale ends right here with this shameful defeat of humanity. Man's nature is so strange, isn't it, friends? If you cannot bet on human goodness, you can certainly bet on human evil, because the demon hidden within a human can come out at any time. What do you have to say about this spine-chilling open ending? Do share in the comments.